I knew I was there as sort of a songwriter among singers, so when I was performing, I just wanted to be as authentic as possible because I thought that might have been the thing, as opposed to trying to impress everybody with some run I can't do. So I tried to stay really, consistent. I will say though, especially after we had filmed, I guess, 4 rounds before it actually aired, and so once I was able to sort of see how they're editing, I think it did change how I was interviewed and how I gave them materials. I think I just had a better sense of what they were looking for once I actually saw it in the edit.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of the editing, a lot of like I know a lot of performers are edited in a certain way that maybe not like puts them in a good light. Was
Mhm.
that something like that you were worried about?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely something I was worried about it conceptually because I didn't really want to enter a show that I thought was disingenuous or anything like that. To be
Yeah.
honest, I wasn't super worried about it for me because I kind of lack a personality anyway. So I figured, what can they really edit? I'm not giving them much, other than, thanks so much. But I was very pleasantly surprised, or maybe not surprised, but in my experience at least, what the viewer saw is sort of how it went. There was nothing I thought was edited sort of disingenuously. I thought it was all sort of kind of an accurate depiction of what was going on.
Now, after leaving the show, do you feel like energized about your career now?
Oh, super. Yeah, I mean, I've always been really passionate about it, and so there's been a sort of an underlying level of that, but I think leaving Idol and it's definitely sort of been to make the top 14 was such an honor. It was a lot further than I thought I'd get, so it's definitely validating, and it just made me really excited to um, hit the ground running. And when you're doing Idol, you can't half-ass it, so you have to be
Mhm.
100% in it. So as much fun as I was having and as much as I would have loved to stay and, hung out and did a couple more rounds, it also was very exciting for me to go back to being Jake Thistle music full time, and that's
Yeah.
something that I was really looking forward to and I'm having a great time doing now. So there definitely was sort of an energizing that came from the show.
Now, was there anything about the business side of the industry that you kind of like were like, whoa, about?
Um, I wouldn't, I'm not sure. I mean, one thing that always is always impressive to me is how small the business is, and everybody knows each other. And so that is funny. It's
Yeah.
just even if it's people I didn't specifically cross paths with, but I know they work on the show, and I know that they also work with this guy that I've met, and whatever that guy that I've worked with, or whatever it might be. But that's something I always get a real kick out of. It's just how many people are sort of sharing responsibilities in the industry.
Yeah. Now, let's to step back a little bit. You released an album in 2021, Down the Line. So I'm kind of curious, like, how do you look back at that album 5 years later?
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just thinking about that the other day because I played like sort of a songwriter show up here, and I ended up doing one of those songs. And I don't really play that record live that much anymore, but that was a really funny project because it was a pandemic thing. It was just to keep me from going insane. Maybe I went a different kind of insane trying to do it, but I was off of school. I was a sophomore in high school when everything shut down, and it seemed wrong to not be doing something because we weren't going to school and nobody knew what was going on. Like once
Yeah.
the school year ended and a new school year started, we had a little bit more structure to our virtual days. But in those early months, it was just like, I don't know, just do something. So that's what I did. And it was so, I mean, it was really paramount to my process and sort of how I end up working now was just sort of trying to figure it out as I went. So I'm really, really proud of that record. I made it in a really hard way. I had no idea that it was difficult at the time because it was the only way I knew how to do it. But now that I now that I know how to do it a better way, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I actually pulled that off because I did it on sort of a soundboard and I had to overdub everything live. So, there was no punching and there was no I didn't use any computers whatsoever. I literally mixed it in a soundboard and then just exported it
Oh,
on a
wow.
on a, on a USB. So, now that I've sort of unlocked Logic and Pro Tools, I know there's easier ways to do it, but so I mean, in a lot of ways, it was sort of like an idol type boot camp to record that record because I was just sitting there and just really in it full time. I mean, it was a much sadder, lonelier boot camp because it was COVID and I wasn't with a bunch of people on national TV, but nonetheless.
Yeah. You mentioned, going to school during the pandemic. Like when you had that structure, did you still find it hard to like learn virtually?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved school. I consider myself lucky in that regard because I have a lot of friends who don't. But I always got a real kick out of it, and I loved learning. But yeah, I definitely struggled. I mean, I love people. That's my favorite part of it. That's why I like touring the best, and that's why I liked school. Going to college, going to high school, I had a great time. Um, and I did not have a great time on the computer. It's just
Yeah.
it's totally different. And so I remember being one of the first kids that went back. Our school eventually gave us an option on if we wanted to go back or not, and I was one. And so there were some classes where I was literally the only kid there, but even that, just me and the teacher, was sort of enough to feel like a person, and that's good for creativity too, I think. So I had a good time going back. But yeah, I learning, I guess, was struggled, I think, from at the pandemic, but also just meeting people and not being able to meet people was really a funny thing for me.
Yeah. Now, in terms of creativity in your songwriting, did you see that change over the 5 years?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I'm pulling from similar influences as I used to when it comes to melodies and lyrics, and I think that's just kind of what my blood is at this point, is who I've listened to my entire life and the songs I gravitate toward. But production wise, I think I'm in a much different place now, and I think a lot of that just comes from I make really elaborate demos, and I always have. It's probably the control freak in me, but I just kind of want everything mapped out before I go into the studio. And once I moved off of that soundboard where I recorded that first record, and I started to work in Logic, that really allowed me to evolve my sound because now it wasn't just a couple tracks that I could make on guitars and bass and piano. It was basically unlocked everything, and I can use MIDI to make whatever instrument I want. And that
Yeah.
was something that I really started to enjoy, and that was a deep dive I've done really over the past 2 years. And so I think structurally how these songs are coming together are different than they used to because they're getting realized, I guess, much earlier in the writing process than they used to.
Right. So, like you mentioned, obviously music developing for you. So, like over the past 5 years, what is something that the biggest lesson you learned personally or in life?
Oh wow, well, yeah, I reflect on that a lot because, I think the pandemic was a real learning experience for everyone, but for me, entering it as, a 16-year-old and then, looking at myself now being 22, like I know that that's a big time of development regardless. And so I get a real kick at it, sort of figuring out what I figured out because of that experience or my experience touring or whatever it is, and what I just would have figured out anyway because that was, just the time where you're figuring stuff out. But I would say for me, it was really just how important a sense of community is to me. And that's something that I learned a lot with Idol as well, is getting to kind of just for sometimes 12 hours a day, every day, getting to hang with people who share a passion and come from completely different backgrounds and, different musical styles and beliefs and whatever. But this real shared passion was something that I really had it was just it was my favorite joy of the season, and that's something that I've sort of picked up over the last 5 years anyway. Like once things opened up, I kind of entered the pandemic as a musician, I guess, like a young musician that wanted to do it. But I came out considering myself a little bit more of a songwriter and really wanting to do that. And so it was a new community that I was sort of introduced to once things opened back up, and that's something that I've really gravitated toward in the last 5 years is just trying to figure out how I can stay surrounded by people that are, you know, basically I like being around songwriters who I say, "Oh, screw you, that's a really good song that pisses me off," and then I can try to emulate it.
Right. So, what's really cool to like look at that first album and then look at songs like "Sleep on Me" and then your new song that there's still like that rootsy identity to it. So, how important has that been for you to keep that musical identity intact?
It's been really important. I think one of the things about my influences is, I grew up listening to a lot of classic rock, and that was my favorite, and I still listen to it all the time. But I also, I'm a huge fan of, people like the Japanese House or Sam Fender and the 1975. And so when we're going in to make a record now, my biggest thing is how can we bridge those two sounds and still remain
Mhm.
authentic. And so that's one of my favorite parts of making these records. And we're gearing up for a record this year, and we've recorded that "Sleep on Me" and some of the singles we've releasing will be on. And we've done a couple songs in Boston, a couple songs in LA, a few in Nashville, a couple in London, a couple in New York, and we're just really pulling in from everywhere. And that's where I'm learning the most is by working with as many people as possible. So it's been a real joy. But yeah, it's important for me to sort of, even if it's not keeping the sound, as long as it sounds like something that I would make, I'm okay with that. I just don't, I'm afraid of left field. I want to
Yeah.
stay kind of down the middle, And then I have a good time evolving that middle, and that's the thing too. Like the songs I'm putting out now would have sounded really out of place on that record that I made in the pandemic. Um,
Yeah.
but they might not, but they won't sound out of place on this record, I don't think.
Yeah, because like hiding in the vacancy is like it's still very you, but it feels bigger, it's more polished, but there's still that signature like underlying like Jake Thistle sound. So can you kind of talk about like building this one musically?
Absolutely. Yeah, I recorded this in LA with Stacy Jones and Billy Loeffler, and it was such a blast getting to work with them. It was my first time working with these guys, and Hiding in the Vacancy was one that took kind of a while to figure out. The lyrics had been sort of Frankensteined into all these other different songs at one point, and I knew there were good elements and not, and then I'd put them together and it didn't work and it just kept. So I think that was one of the reasons the song sort of got so big is because I might take the first verse from this song where I loved, okay, well, I liked the organ in that demo and I liked the drums in this demo and whatever. And then it's like, okay, let's just kind of take everything, put it in, and then mute. And that was kind of the process when I made this demo. I think the original demo had probably about like 90 tracks or something. And then it was once we decided, okay, the writing's good, like we can try to tweak it and bring it to the studio. That's when I get to go in and go mute, 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 and leave it at like 50 tracks or whatever. And then we can build it out from there. And so this song was one of my favorites to sort of realize like that because the chord structures are pretty simple. The rhythm's pretty simple. I think this song is one of my favorite things about it is its ability to it leaves a lot of air in the mix, and
Yeah.
it's a one chord and a four chord. It's a one chord and four chord. So the demo, it just kind of like pieces kept breaking off, like in what I felt like was like a perfect, sized piece. And so it was really good to talk that through with the producers in the studio and like get some expert opinions on it, which was great.
And vocally, like you mentioned earlier about like not hitting like high notes or like on big notes on like Idol. But this song does give you a chance to show off vocally because you can actually hear some of the rasp in your voice come pretty naturally. So is that like something that was important for this song to like really start to like stretch yourself vocally?
For sure. Well, I mean, I'm always, looking to put my best forward, in some way or another with the songs that are coming out, and rasp is funny because it's one of those things I've had sort of my entire life. It's just sort of how I've sang, but I always thought it like I started gigging when I was 9, and I felt like that rasp on a 10-year-old's voice I thought was a little strange, so I would try to like shy away from it a little bit as much as I could, but it was always there, and that was always like the most natural way for me to sing.
Mhm.
And in a lot of ways, I still think I sound like a kid. It's probably just denial about not being a kid anymore. But
Right.
I feel a little bit more comfortable leaning into it now if I need to for a powerful moment because I think now I pretty much sound like what I'm gonna sound like, or at least because I'm in my 20s, I'll probably currently sound the best I'll ever sound, which is either exciting or depressing. And so I'll lean into it when I can because I think I've sort of found it. It doesn't sound like that 11-year-old's trying to sound like, Huey Lewis or Bruce Springsteen or something like that.
Yeah. No, like this song kind of reminds me in the spirit of like Noah Kahan. Is he someone that you kind of would like to emulate, either musically or just kind of like career wise?
Oh, for sure. I mean, Noah I mean, he's particularly incredible to me because I mean, he's obviously writing great songs. He's obviously evolving his sound, but I mean, the pressure of also being like such an icon in culture. There's very few people
Mhm.
that are doing that, and what, like 2 nights at Fenway Park is like such a ridiculous thing to
Yeah.
comprehend. And so I've always been super impressed by Noah and his ability to just be like so even keeled in his sound, and his new record's great. I'm excited about it. I haven't listened completely all the way through yet because I haven't had a drive long enough where I can get really into it. But I've listened to the
Yeah.
first 20 minutes multiple times already.
Nice. Nice. So you mentioned earlier a record. So are you making an EP or a full-length album?
It's gonna be a full length, which I'm excited about.
Okay.
It'll be my first full length on a label that I've been signed to, for a while. So that'll be fun.
So like what can you talk about like the thematic scope of the album and musically is Hiding in the Vacancy pretty indicative of the album?
I think so. I hope so at least, because I'm really really I'm I'm very fond of the sound that we kind of discovered with Hiding in the Vacancy. And so I think moving forward, we're still recording a little bit. Most of it's recorded already, but that's going to be sort of what I'm looking to, as sort of like the sort of anchor for the record. And sort of when in doubt, we can kind of put in a Hiding in the Vacancy type mix. And I just I was really grateful for the team that I working with Stacy and Billy and everyone they brought in. So yeah, I mean, I think for me in terms of the record is I had a collection of songs that's still evolving. I probably submitted around 30 to 35 demos, and then we ended up picking around 15 to record. We're still recording a couple, so that all these numbers are subject to change. But then we'll narrow it down to 12 for the record. So that's one of my most exciting things is we're recording this record without exactly knowing what we want the center point to be,
Mm.
which is really how I like to do it because it sort of helps. For example, when we started recording the record, Hiding in the Vacancy wasn't even written yet, and so if we were to just go in for 2 weeks and record, I would have picked a different center point, and then we might not have found what I like about Hiding the Vacancy, which is, I like the other songs on the record too, so I'm very excited for everyone to hear everything. But getting to really stretch out has been a good opportunity for me to sort of dive deep into what the record means to me and what I think it means to my catalog as well, and sort of how it compares to what I plan on doing in the future and what I've done in the past.